Life in Louisville, Kentucky had a rhythm to it, a comfortable beat I'd grown to love. My name is Brandon Clark, and at 26 I thought I had a pretty good handle on things. I worked as a project manager for a local construction company, a job that kept me busy but also let me enjoy the evenings. My days were full of blueprints, deadlines, and the satisfying thud of hammers. My nights, though, those were for Leo. Leo was my husband, my partner in everything. We'd been together for 5 years, married for almost a year and a half. He was a software engineer, brilliant and a bit quirky, with a laugh that could make me forget any stress from work. We lived in a cozy little house in the Highlands, with a small backyard that Leo insisted on filling with various herbs and a surprisingly aggressive tomato plant. Our life together wasn't perfect, no one's is, but it felt right. It felt solid. We had our routines: Saturday morning runs along the river, pizza and a movie on Fridays, quiet evenings on the porch with our dog, Buster, curled up at our feet. These were the moments that built our world brick by loving brick. I'd always considered myself a pretty perceptive guy, not nosy, just observant. I noticed the little things, the shifts in moods, the unspoken cues. But I missed this. I missed it completely, and the thought still makes my stomach churn with a cold, heavy dread. It started subtly, a feeling in the air more than anything concrete. Leo had been working longer hours, which wasn't unusual for his job. He'd always been dedicated, but then he started being a little more guarded with his phone. He'd take it with him to the bathroom, which he never did. He'd de-angle the screen away from me if I walked by while he was texting. Small things, easily dismissed as paranoia or just him wanting a little privacy. We all need that, right? I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that I was just being silly. Then came the night everything shattered. He was in the shower and his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I wasn't trying to snoop, I swear. I was just reaching for my own book and the screen lit up with a notification. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize. The name associated with it was just a single letter, K. My heart did a weird, frantic stutter. The message itself was what twisted the knife. It read, "Thinking of you, can't wait for Friday." Thinking of you. A simple phrase, but in that context, with the way he'd been acting, it hit me like a physical blow. My hands started to shake. I picked up the phone, my fingers trembling as I unlocked it. Leo and I knew each other's passcodes. It was never a secret, just a convenience. Now it felt like a betrayal of trust on a deeper level. I scrolled through the messages, my breath catching in my throat with each new line. It wasn't just thinking of you. It was a full-blown conversation, going back weeks, then months. Explicit messages, pictures exchanged, dates planned. My vision blurred, tears stinging my eyes, but I kept reading, needing to know the extent of the damage. My husband, the man I loved, the man I trusted with my entire life, was having an affair. A full-blown, no-holds-barred affair. The messages referred to me, sometimes dismissively, sometimes as an obstacle. "She's out of town this weekend," or "can't talk, she's home." My identity was stripped down to a pronoun, a problem to be avoided. It felt like a punch to the gut over and over again, and the other person, Kay, seemed completely on board, responding with equal enthusiasm. They knew he was married. The sheer casualness of their deception, their shared secret, made me feel sick to my stomach. I saw the dates, the times. He'd been seeing her, Kay, for almost a year, since last November. My mind reeled. A year. A whole year of lies, of sneaking around, of pretending everything was fine. A year of me living in a blissful ignorance while my entire world was crumbling around me brick by brick, just not in the way I thought. When Leo finally came out of the shower, humming a tune, towel wrapped around his waist, he looked at me, a soft smile on his face. "Hey, what you reading?" he asked, oblivious. I couldn't speak. The phone was still clutched in my hand, the screen glowing with their damning words. My face must have been a mess, tears streaming down my cheeks, my jaw tight with a mixture of grief and rage. His smile faltered. His eyes dropped to the phone. The color drained from his face, leaving him pale and shocked. "Brandon," he whispered, his voice barely audible. I just stared at him, unable to form words. The images from the messages flashed in my mind, the intimacy, the shared jokes, the plans for a future that wasn't with me. The betrayal was a physical weight pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. He slowly walked towards me, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. "What's wrong? What's going on?" he asked, even though he knew. He absolutely knew. I thrust the phone at him, my hand shaking so violently I nearly dropped it. "This," I choked out, my voice raw and broken. "This is what's going on." He took the phone, his gaze fixed on the screen. He scrolled, his face growing paler with each message. The humming stopped. The easy smile was gone, replaced by a mask of shame and fear. He started to stammer, "Brandon, I can explain." But there was no explanation that could erase the images, the words, the year of deceit, not for me. I stood up, feeling a cold fury begin to replace the initial shock and sadness. My eyes burned, but the tears had stopped. "Explain what, Leo? Explain how you've been lying to me for a year. Explain how you've been sleeping with someone else behind my back." Explain how you've made a fool out of me. My voice was rising, trembling with the force of my emotions. He tried to reach for me, but I recoiled as if he were on fire. Don't touch me, I said, the words cutting through the air. Don't you dare touch me. He dropped his hand, looking utterly defeated. Please, Brandon, just let me tell you. No, I said firmly, my voice gaining strength. Not now, I can't. I need to think. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, yes, but also a strange, cold clarity. I wasn't going to scream and throw things. Not yet. I needed information. I needed to understand the full scope of this betrayal before I could even begin to process it. I walked out of the bedroom, leaving him standing there, naked and exposed in more ways than one. I grabbed my car keys, my wallet, and my phone. I didn't know where I was going, just that I couldn't stay there, not another second under the same roof as him. As I drove away, the comfortable rhythm of my Louisville life felt completely shattered, replaced by a chaotic, deafening silence. The love I felt for Leo was still there, but it was buried under layers of hurt and betrayal, and beneath it all a growing ember of something else, a desire for something to be made right. I wasn't sure what that meant yet, but I knew with a chilling certainty that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I needed to understand who this K was. I needed to know everything, and then only then could I figure out what came next. My marriage, my life, had been reduced to a secret affair, and I was going to find out every single detail of that secret. I wasn't going to divorce him yet. There were too many things to sort out, too many plans to make. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't going to be easy for anyone involved, especially not for Leo and his little secret. The quiet, observant part of me was now awake, and it was hungry for answers. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit of retribution. This wasn't just about my feelings anymore. This was about justice, and I was going to make sure it was served. This was the start of a whole new chapter, one I never asked for, but one I was now determined to write on my own terms. The problem was clear, my husband's infidelity. The nemesis, still mostly faceless, was Kay and Leo himself, and I was about to embark on a journey I never imagined. My stable, happy life in Louisville, Kentucky, had just been turned upside down, and I knew I couldn't just sit back and let it be. My heart might be broken, but my mind was sharper than ever, and it was starting to scheme. The quiet anger was building, turning into a cold, determined resolve. The comfortable rhythm of my life had been broken, but a new, more dangerous beat was beginning. The tires hummed a low, mournful tune on the highway as I sped out of Louisville, the city lights fading in my rearview mirror. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. I didn't have a destination, just a burning need to put distance between myself and that house, that lie, that man. My mind was a whirlwind, replaying every sweet word, every shared laugh, every intimate moment, now tainted by the knowledge of his betrayal. A year, a whole year. How could I have been so blind? So trusting, I pulled over at a roadside rest stop, the kind with just a few dim lights and the distant drone of trucks. The air was cool, biting at my skin, but I barely felt it. All I could feel was the cold, hollow ache in my chest. I pulled out my phone, the same device that had shattered my world. I needed to go back through Leo's messages, needed to understand more about Kay. The single letter on his phone wasn't enough. I scrolled again, my eyes scanning for any clue, any full name, anything that could give me more information about the woman who had helped tear my life apart. It took me a while, digging through old chats, shared photos, and even a few deleted messages I managed to recover with a quick search on how to do it. The digital trail was there if you knew where to look. Finally, I found it, a mention of a coffee shop, a time, and a full name. Kendra, not just a letter anymore. A name, a person. It was a small victory, a piece of the puzzle, but it fueled a new kind of resolve. I had to know what she knew, how involved she truly was. Was she just an innocent party, tricked by a manipulative man, or was she a knowing accomplice? My fingers hovered over the keyboard, a knot of dread and determination tightening in my stomach. I found her number, tucked away in an old text message thread between Leo and Kendra, where they were confirming plans. My heart pounded like a drum against my ribs. This was it. I was about to step into the mess, to confront the other side of this ugly coin. I typed out a message, my thumbs shaking. "Hi, this is Brandon. I'm Leo's husband." I stared at the screen, waiting. The silence stretched, long and agonizing. Then, after what felt like an eternity, a reply. "Leo? Who's Leo?" My eyebrows furrowed. Who's Leo? Was she really playing dumb, or was it possible that Leo was using a fake name with her? I tried to rationalize it, to make sense of the absurdity. "Your boyfriend Leo, the one you've been seeing since last November." Another pause. Then, "I think you have the wrong number. I don't know anyone named Leo." A cold anger started to simmer beneath my skin. Wrong number. This was too much. I had her number from Leo's phone, from explicit conversations, from plans they'd made. She knew exactly who Leo was. She was lying. Straight up, bold-faced lying. My first thought was that she was just trying to protect herself, to deny everything. Maybe Leo had spun her some elaborate story about being single, about me being an ex he couldn't shake. That was the charitable interpretation, the one that made her less of a villain and more of a victim like me. It didn't make the pain any less, but it offered a sliver of understanding. I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt for a moment, to play along with her feigned ignorance. "Look," I typed, my voice in my head calm, even though my hands were still trembling. "I have proof. I have messages, pictures, I know everything." Her reply came almost instantly this time. "I don't know what you're talking about. Please stop texting me." That was it. That was the moment the last shred of benefit of the doubt evaporated. The way she responded, the quick denial, the immediate deflection, it wasn't the reaction of someone who was genuinely confused or even just surprised. It was the reaction of someone caught. I leaned back against the headrest, closing my eyes. My initial anger at Leo had been a raw, visceral thing. Now it was evolving, hardening into something colder, more calculated. The idea that this woman, Kendra, might have been an unknowing participant had been a small comfort, a way to compartmentalize the blame. But if she was actively lying, actively denying, then she was just as complicit. They were a team in this deception. I drove back towards Louisville, but not to the house. I found a quiet hotel on the outskirts of town, just needing a bed and a few hours of uneasy sleep. My mind, however, wouldn't rest. It kept going back to those messages on Leo's phone, Kendra's responses, her casual enthusiasm, the way they talked about me as if I were a mere inconvenience. Back in the quiet of the hotel room, alone with my thoughts, I pulled up Leo's phone again. I needed to see it, to truly internalize it, without the haze of initial shock and tears. I scrolled through their conversations, slowly, deliberately, and then I saw it. A subtle detail I'd missed in my initial, frantic reading. It was a casual comment from Kendra in response to Leo complaining about having to stay late at work. She'd written, "Tell me about it. My boyfriend is on a business trip next week, so I'm stuck with solo dinner duty." My breath hitched. Boyfriend. She had a boyfriend. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. She wasn't just someone Leo was cheating with. She was cheating on someone herself. They weren't just betraying me. They were betraying their own partners actively together. The shared secret wasn't just between them and Leo's marriage, it was between them and two separate, unsuspecting people. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a simple affair born of a moment of weakness. This was a sustained, deliberate act of deception by two people who clearly had no regard for the feelings or trust of their partners. Kendra hadn't just played dumb with me, she was a liar and a cheater herself. She knew Leo was married, of course she did. She was just as deep in the muck as he was. My earlier attempt to give her the benefit of the doubt now felt foolish, naive. The anger intensified, not with a fiery burst, but with a deep, chilling burn. It wasn't just about my hurt anymore, though that was still a gaping wound. It was about the sheer audacity, the disrespect, the calculated cruelty of it all. They were both living double lives, weaving a web of lies around everyone they supposedly cared about. I spent the rest of the night sifting through those messages, screenshotting everything. Every explicit photo, every incriminating text, every date, every casual mention of their deceit. I needed evidence, not just for myself, but for what I knew with a sudden, icy clarity I was going to do next. The next morning I drove back to the house. Leo was still there, sitting on the couch, looking pale and disheveled like he hadn't slept. When he saw me, he flinched, then stood up slowly. "Brandon," he said, his voice hoarse. "Please, can we talk?" I walked past him, heading straight for the kitchen, my phone still clutched in my hand, heavy with the weight of my discoveries. I poured myself a glass of water, my back to him. "Oh, we're going to talk, Leo," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "But it's not going to be the conversation you think." He hesitated, then followed me. "I'm so sorry, Brandon. I messed up. I know I did. Please just give me a chance to explain." I turned, my eyes meeting his. There was no warmth left in them, just a cold, hard resolve. "Explain what? Explain how this isn't the first time you've done this with Kendra." I watched his face closely as the words left my mouth. The color drained from it again, leaving him a ghastly white. His jaw dropped. He hadn't expected me to know that. "I went through your phone, Leo," I continued, my voice steady. "Every message, every deleted text. I know about Kendra's boyfriend. I know she's in a relationship too, and I know this isn't your first rodeo with her. You two aren't just having an affair, you're partners in crime." He looked utterly shattered, deflated. The last vestiges of his excuses crumbled under the weight of my words. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. "So don't try to play the victim or the confused innocent," I said, taking a sip of water, feeling a strange, detached calm. "Because you're not, and neither is she." I looked at the screenshots on my phone, the undeniable proof of their shared deceit. I wasn't going to let it be for now as a courtesy. That courtesy had been thrown back in my face. This wasn't about whether Kendra continued to see him or not. It was about the deliberate destruction of trust and lives. and I had the tools, the evidence, and the cold, burning desire to make them both pay. My heart was broken, yes, but my mind was sharper than ever, and it was no longer just scheming. It was planning. A storm was coming to Louisville, and I was going to be the one to unleash it. This was just the beginning. The problem had grown, deepened, and become more personal. The failed attempt to simply inform Kay had revealed an even darker layer of betrayal. And now the true scope of my mission was becoming clear. The air in the kitchen was thick with unspoken words, with the debris of a shattered life. Leo stood there, a ghost of the man I thought I knew, his excuses crumbling around him like dry dust. My words had stripped him bare, exposed the hollow core of his deceit. There was no more begging, no more stammering, just a defeated silence that felt heavier than any shouted argument. I watched him for a long moment, the cold glass of water pressed against my lips, a strange calm settling over me. The initial tsunami of grief and anger had receded, leaving behind a hard, sharp coastline of determination. This wasn't just about my pain anymore. It was about the principle of it, the absolute disregard for human decency that both he and Kendra had shown. I finished my water, set the glass down with a precise clink, and walked past him, heading to the study. "Don't expect me to sleep in the same bed as you," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Or even in the same room. I'll be in the guest room." He mumbled something, a faint protest, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Every fiber of my being recoiled from his presence. The thought of his touch, his breath, his casual lie made my skin crawl. In the guest room, I closed the door, the click of the latch a small, satisfying sound of separation. The room was sparse, a haven of neutrality compared to the battlefield that was our bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed, the screenshots on my phone a stark testament to the truth. My mind, usually so good at managing projects and timelines, now focused with chilling precision on a different kind of project: revenge. It wasn't a word I'd ever associated with myself, a concept I'd always dismissed as petty or unproductive. But now it felt like a vital, necessary act of self-preservation. I wasn't interested in screaming matches or public humiliation, not primarily. I wanted something deeper, something that would echo the depth of their betrayal. I wanted them to truly feel the consequences of their actions, not just intellectually, but in their very lives. My first target was Kendra. I needed to understand her, to find the weak points in her carefully constructed double life. The only lead I had was the vague mention of her boyfriend. "My boyfriend is on a business trip next week, so I'm stuck with solo dinner duty." That was it. No name, no details, but it was a thread, and I was going to pull on it until the whole tapestry unraveled. I spent the next few days in a blur of detached activity. I went to work, went through the motions, nodding at colleagues, making polite small talk, all while a storm raged inside me. My colleagues, my friends, they saw Brandon Clark, project manager, efficient and reliable. They had no idea I was a man on the precipice, teetering between devastating heartbreak and cold, calculated vengeance. At home, Leo became a phantom. He tried to talk, to apologize, to plead, but I simply wouldn't engage. I ate meals at different times, went to bed later, woke up earlier. The house, once a sanctuary, was now a shared prison of silence and resentment. Buster, our dog, was the only one who seemed to notice the shift, his big brown eyes following me with a mournful confusion. Even he felt the chill. My evenings were dedicated to digging. I didn't just want to expose Kendra to her boyfriend. I wanted to do it in a way that left no room for doubt, no opportunity for her to lie her way out of it. I had screenshots of her explicit messages to Leo. I had her number. I needed to find her boyfriend. This was harder than I anticipated. Louisville isn't a small town, but it's not New York City either. Social media was my first approach. I typed Kendra into Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, cross-referencing with common last names or mutual friends I might have with Leo's contacts. It was a tedious, frustrating process. There were dozens of Kendras in Louisville, and none of them immediately matched the fragmented picture I had in my head. I tried looking up Leo's deleted call logs and text messages for any other names, any connections, but he was good at covering his tracks, especially after I'd found the first bat. My breakthrough came not from a direct search, but from a subtle detail in one of the recovered messages. Leo had mentioned meeting Kendra at a specific coffee shop downtown. "See you at the Daily Grind around 5, he'd texted. It was a popular spot, but the detail itself was a new angle. I decided to stake it out. The idea felt ridiculous, like something out of a bad spy movie, but I was desperate. The next evening after work, I parked my car a block away from the Daily Grind. I sat there, sipping a lukewarm coffee from a thermos, watching the people come and go. It was mundane, boring, and utterly soul-crushing. Every happy couple, every laugh, every casual touch felt like a fresh wound. After 2 hours of fruitless waiting, just as I was about to give up, she appeared. Kendra. She walked out of the coffee shop, phone to her ear, a bright, easy smile on her face. She was pretty in an unassuming way, with kind eyes that now seemed to mock my pain. She wore a simple dress, her hair pulled back. She looked normal like any other woman in Louisville, and that was the most unsettling part. How could someone who looked so normal be capable of such calculated deception? She wasn't alone. A man walked out behind her carrying 2 coffees. He was tall, dark-haired, with a kind face and a comfortable, familiar air about him. He put an arm around her, pulled her close, and kissed the top of her head. My stomach clenched. This had to be him. Her boyfriend. I quickly snapped a few photos with my phone, trying to be discreet. My hands were shaking again, but not from fear this time. It was a cold, righteous anger. I had him. I had the missing piece. Now that I had a face, the social media search became exponentially easier. A quick reverse image search, then a deep dive into local social circles. His name was Mark Davies. He was a project manager for a competing construction company, which was an ironic twist that didn't escape me. Even more ironic, our companies had bid on a few of the same projects in the past. It felt like the universe was playing a sick joke. Mark's online profile was public enough. He had photos with Kendra, a few years' worth. They looked like a happy, stable couple. Trips, dinners, holidays, a normal life. A life just like the one Leo and I had, or so I thought. The deception ran deep, a festering wound beneath a beautiful surface. My plan solidified. I wasn't just going to send Mark an anonymous text or email. I was going to do it in a way that left no room for denial, no possibility of doubt. I compiled all the evidence, the screenshots of Leo and Kendra's explicit conversations, the photos, the dates, the times. I even included the photos I'd taken of Kendra and Mark together, a visual testament to their seemingly perfect facade. But something still gnawed at me. The Reddit post, the one that had unknowingly mirrored my situation, had talked about a failed attempt to just inform the other party. Kendra had played dumb. What if Mark did too? What if he was just as complicit, just as willing to turn a blind eye? The thought made my blood run cold. If they were both involved in cheating, then my attempt to expose Kendra to Mark would be meaningless. It would just be one cheater telling another cheater that their shared cheater was cheating. It was a mess of infidelity that threatened to swallow me whole. This thought, this possibility, made me falter. I had been so focused on Kendra, on making her pay, that I hadn't considered the deeper implications. My initial anger had blinded me to the intricate web of deceit. What if Mark was just as bad? What if exposing Kendra to him would only reveal my pain to someone who wouldn't care? The idea of making myself vulnerable to a potentially equally callous individual filled me with a fresh wave of dread. My carefully constructed plan, born of cold resolve, suddenly felt fragile, exposed. I needed to know more about Mark. I needed to know what kind of man he was, if he was truly an unwitting victim or another player in this twisted game. The revenge I sought needed to be precise, surgical. It couldn't be a scattershot attempt that might just backfire. I couldn't afford to make myself more of a fool than I already felt. My problem had grown. It wasn't just about Leo and Kendra anymore. It was about understanding the full architecture of their deceit, about navigating a minefield of potential betrayals, and ensuring that my actions, when they finally came, would hit their mark with devastating accuracy. I had to go deeper, much deeper, before I could unleash the storm. This felt like a setback, a moment where the weight of it all threatened to crush me. I was alone, isolated, surrounded by lies, and the path forward was far more complicated than I had imagined. The hope of a quick, clean strike had evaporated, replaced by the grim reality of a long, arduous campaign. This was the low point, the realization that my emotional pain was just the beginning of a complex, disheartening journey. But even in that despair, a tiny ember of defiance still glowed. I would find a way. I had to, not just for revenge, but for my own sanity, my own closure. This wasn't over. It had only just begun to truly unravel. The realization that Mark might be complicit had been a punch to the gut, worse almost than the initial discovery of Leo's affair. It took away the simple, clean lines of good and evil, replacing them with a murky, unsettling gray. I had envisioned myself as the avenging angel, bringing justice to an unsuspecting victim and a manipulative cheater. Now the victim might be just as dirty as the perpetrator. It was a bitter pill to swallow, adding another layer to the already overwhelming grief and anger. I spent the next few days in a fog, going through the motions at work, but my mind was constantly churning, replaying every interaction, every detail from Leo's phone. The images of Kendra and Mark, seemingly so happy and normal, haunted me. How could two people, both in relationships, so casually destroy the trust of their partners? It was a level of callousness I struggled to comprehend. My attempts to interact with Leo were minimal. He tried to corner me, tried to apologize, to beg, but I kept him at arm's length, my words clipped, my eyes cold. "I need space, Leo," I'd say, my voice flat. "A lot of space." He would sigh, slump, and retreat, a shadow of his former self. Part of me, a small, wounded part, felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the roaring fire of betrayal. He deserved to suffer, to feel the isolation he had so carelessly inflicted upon me. My focus, however, was still on Mark. I needed to know. I couldn't unleash my storm until I understood the full topography of the battlefield. My investigation shifted from simply identifying him to understanding his character, his habits, his vulnerabilities. Since we worked in the same industry, albeit for competing companies, I started by discreetly asking around. Not about Mark directly, but about his company, about upcoming bids, about the general scuttlebutt of the Louisville construction scene. I'd casually bring up his company name in conversations with industry contacts, feigning professional curiosity. "Heard anything about Davy's latest project?" I'd ask, trying to keep my tone neutral. Most of what I heard was standard business talk. He was a good project manager, reliable, a bit quiet, nothing that screamed co-conspirator in a double infidelity. This was both a relief and a frustration. A relief that he might be an innocent, a frustration that I still didn't have the definitive answer I craved. The most effective approach, I decided, was a direct, albeit subtle, observation. I knew Mark's office building location. It wasn't far from my own. I started adjusting my lunch breaks, sometimes driving by his office during peak lunch hours or parking nearby in the late afternoon. It felt like stalking, and a knot of unease twisted in my stomach with each passing car. But I pushed through it, telling myself it was necessary. I needed to gather intel, not just for my revenge, but for my own peace of mind. I needed to understand what kind of man Kendra had been deceiving alongside Leo. One afternoon, my patience paid off. I saw Mark leaving his office building, not alone. He was with another man, older, with a distinguished, almost stern look. They were talking animatedly, hands gesturing, seemingly deep in conversation. As they walked closer to where I was parked, I overheard snippets of their discussion. They were talking about a project, a large civic building downtown. The older man sounded like a mentor, offering advice, and Mark was listening intently, occasionally asking questions. Then the older man clapped Mark on the shoulder. "Good man, Mark, always on top of things. Kendra's a lucky woman to have you." Mark smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "Thanks, Mr. Henderson, I try." Mr. Henderson, that name clicked. I vaguely remembered hearing about a senior partner at Mark's company named Henderson, a highly respected figure in the Louisville construction community. The way he spoke, the easy camaraderie, the casual mention of Kendra, it didn't sound like he was talking to a man who was knowingly involved in a double affair. It sounded like he genuinely admired Mark and genuinely believed in his relationship with Kendra. That interaction, that small piece of overheard conversation, became a pivotal moment. It shifted my perception of Mark. He seemed genuine, earnest. The smile, the way he received the compliment, it felt authentic. It gave me a strong indication that he was, indeed, an unwitting victim. The relief that washed over me was profound, a release of tension I hadn't realized I was holding onto. My initial, agonizing fear that my revenge would be complicated by another complicit party began to recede. Now my mission was clear again. Kendra had not only betrayed me by helping Leo cheat, but she had also betrayed this man, Mark, who seemed to be a genuinely good person. My anger, which had been a tangled mess of hurt and confusion, now had a sharper, more defined edge. It wasn't just about Leo and me anymore. It was about two innocent people being played for fools by a pair of selfish, deceitful individuals. The plan started to crystallize, becoming more refined, more surgical. I wouldn't just expose Kendra to Mark. I would do it in a way that left no room for doubt, no opportunity for her to spin a counter-narrative. I wanted to hit her where it hurt, not just emotionally, but in her carefully constructed life. And Leo, he was still very much a part of this equation. He was the root cause, the initial betrayer. His consequences would be different, more personal, more devastating. The idea that Mark was an innocent victim invigorated me. It gave my mission a renewed sense of moral clarity. I wasn't just seeking personal retribution. I was seeking justice for another person who had been wronged. This wasn't petty. This was necessary. I went back to the hotel room that night, feeling a surge of energy I hadn't felt in weeks. The despair had lifted, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I opened my laptop, pulling up all the evidence I had collected, the screenshots of Leo and Kendra's explicit messages, the photos, the dates, the times. I reviewed the photos I'd taken of Kendra and Mark together outside the coffee shop, a stark reminder of the facade they presented to the world. I needed to create a narrative, a compelling case that would leave no room for Mark to doubt. I decided against an anonymous tip. That was too easy to dismiss, too easy for Kendra to explain away as a crazy ex. No, I needed to make it personal. I needed to deliver the news myself, or at least in a way that directly implicated me and my proof. My mind started to race, connecting the dots. Mark and I were both project managers in competing construction companies. That was the angle. That was the opening. It offered a plausible reason for me to have access to certain information, a professional pretext that could mask the true, devastating nature of my revelation. I thought about how to approach Mark. A direct confrontation at his office seemed too aggressive, too dramatic. An email, while effective, lacked the personal touch I wanted. I wanted him to see the evidence, to hear the story, to understand the depth of the betrayal directly from someone who had experienced it. Then it hit me. An industry event. There was a large annual construction industry gala coming up in a few weeks, a networking event that both our companies, being prominent in Louisville, would undoubtedly attend. It would be public enough to prevent any immediate outbursts, but private enough for a discreet conversation. It would be perfect. Kendra would likely be there as Mark's date. Leo, if he still thought we were salvaging our marriage, might even try to go with me. The potential for a dramatic, deeply satisfying unveiling was immense. The planning became my new obsession. I started researching the gala, the guest list, the layout of the venue. I began to construct a carefully choreographed sequence of events, a stage for the truth to finally be revealed. The goal was not just to expose Kendra, but to do so in a way that maximized the impact, that delivered a poetic, undeniable blow to her carefully constructed world. And Leo? What about Leo? My rage at him was still a burning ember, but it was now a controlled burn. I realized that by exposing Kendra, I would also, by extension, be exposing Leo. His affair partner's world crumbling would undoubtedly have repercussions for him, but that wasn't enough. He needed his own, separate reckoning, a consequence directly proportional to his betrayal of our marriage. My mind went to our shared assets, our finances, our future plans. This wasn't just about emotional revenge. It was about protecting myself, ensuring my financial stability, and making sure he paid dearly for the damage he had inflicted. I began to discreetly gather all financial documents, statements, and any legal paperwork related to our marriage. I was building a case, not just for emotional retribution, but for a meticulously planned divorce. This wasn't a whim, it was a strategy. The despair I had felt earlier had transformed into a cold, calculated anger, a dangerous determination. I was no longer floundering in the depths of my pain. I was rising slowly but surely with a purpose. Louisville, Kentucky, the city I loved, would bear witness to a different kind of project management from Brandon Clark, one that involved dismantling a web of lies, brick by painful brick. The storm was no longer just coming, it was being meticulously engineered, and its targets had no idea what was about to hit them. The weeks leading up to the construction industry gala were a strange mix of exhilaration and dread. Each day felt like a step closer to judgment, a ticking clock counting down to the moment I would finally unleash the storm. I continued my detached existence with Leo, sharing the same house but occupying entirely separate emotional universes. He continued his attempts to apologize, to bridge the chasm he'd created, but his words were hollow, ringing with a desperate self-preservation that held no genuine remorse for the pain he'd caused. I perfected my strategy for the gala, rehearsing the words I would say, envisioning the reactions, anticipating every possible twist. I had compiled a sleek, discreet digital folder on my phone, containing all the damning evidence, the screenshots of explicit messages, the dates, the times, and the photos I'd taken of Kendra and Mark. My goal was not just to expose, but to dismantle. The night of the gala arrived, a crisp Louisville evening, the kind that hints at the coming winter. The venue, a grand ballroom downtown, glittered with lights and the murmur of hundreds of conversations. I wore my best suit, a dark charcoal that felt less like an outfit and more like armor. As I walked in, I scanned the room, a predator among the unsuspecting. Leo, surprisingly, hadn't come. He'd made some excuse about feeling unwell, a transparent lie I didn't bother to challenge. It was a small mercy, saving me the immediate discomfort of his presence. It didn't take long to spot them, Mark and Kendra. They stood near a large window, laughing with a group of colleagues, Kendra's arm casually linked through Mark's. They looked like the picture of a happy, successful couple, a perfect facade built on a foundation of lies. My blood ran cold, but my resolve hardened. I moved through the crowd, a ghost in my own life, until I was close enough to observe without being noticed. Mark looked genuinely happy, his smile reaching his eyes as he listened to Kendra's animated story. He truly had no idea. I waited for the opportune moment when Mark excused himself to get a drink. As he walked past, heading towards the bar, I intercepted him, stepping into his path with a polite, professional smile. "Mark Davies, isn't it?" I extended my hand. "Brendan Clark from Commonwealth Builders. We've bid against each other a few times." He paused, a flicker of recognition in his eyes, and shook my hand. His grip was firm. "Brandon, yes, I know the name. Good to finally meet you in person." "Likewise," I said, my voice smooth, controlled. "Mind if I have a quick word? It's about a potential ethical conflict related to a mutual associate." The phrase ethical conflict was a carefully chosen trigger. It immediately shifted his professional mind into a serious gear. He frowned slightly, curiosity mingled with concern. "Oh, of course. Let's step over here away from the noise." He led me to a quieter alcove, away from the main throng. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my exterior remained perfectly calm. "I wouldn't bring this up if it wasn't important, Mark," I began, lowering my voice conspiratorially. "But I believe you're dating Kendra, correct?" His expression softened. "Yes, that's right. Kendra's wonderful." A pang of bitter triumph shot through me. He was truly invested. "I'm afraid I have some deeply unsettling news for you then," I said, pulling out my phone. "My husband, Leo, has been having an affair for the past year, and the woman he's been seeing is Kendra." I watched his face closely, every muscle, every flicker of emotion. His eyes widened slightly, then narrowed in confusion. "What? No, that's impossible. You must be mistaken. Kendra would never." He started to shake his head, but his voice lacked conviction. "I wish I was mistaken, Mark," I said, opening the folder on my phone. "But I have proof, extensive proof." I turned the screen towards him, showing him the first screenshot. An explicit message from Kendra to Leo, unmistakably hers. His eyes fixed on the words, and the color slowly drained from his face, leaving him pale and stunned. I scrolled through the messages, showing him a carefully curated selection, the most incriminating, the most undeniable. Photos exchanged, plans made, casual mentions of their respective partners as obstacles. Each swipe of my finger was a surgical strike, dissecting his trust, revealing the rot beneath. I kept my voice low, calm, almost regretful. "This has been going on for over a year, Mark, since last November, and I regret to inform you that Kendra was fully aware that Leo was married. She also mentioned her boyfriend in these messages, which I now understand to be you." He was speechless, his jaw slack, his eyes darting between the screen and me. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut, reeling from the blow. His world, his seemingly stable relationship, was collapsing before his very eyes. Just then, Kendra, probably wondering where Mark had gone, spotted us. She started walking towards us, a smile on her face that quickly faltered as she saw the grim expressions. "Mark, Brandon, what's going on?" she asked, her voice light but with an underlying tremor. Mark didn't look at her. His gaze remained fixed on my phone, then slowly, agonizingly lifted to meet mine. There was a raw, devastating hurt in his eyes, but also a growing spark of anger. "Kendra," he said, his voice a low growl devoid of his usual warmth. "Do you know this man?" Kendra's eyes widened as she saw my face. Recognition and then immediate panic flashed across her features. Her casual smile vanished, replaced by a mask of fear. I don't," she stammered, trying to formulate a denial. I didn't let her. I looked directly at her, my gaze unwavering. "Kendra, I'm Brandon, Leo's husband, and Mark here has just been brought up to speed on your little secret with my husband." Her face went from pale to scarlet in an instant. She gasped, then looked at Mark, a desperate, pleading look in her eyes. "Mark, it's not what he says. He's crazy. He's trying to ruin us." But Mark wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me, then back at the phone in my hand, the undeniable evidence still glowing on the screen. The smile on his face was gone, replaced by a cold, hard fury. He then looked at Kendra, his eyes filled with a heartbreak so profound it was almost tangible. "You knew," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You knew he was married." Kendra tried to reach for him, but he recoiled, just as I had recoiled from Leo. "Mark, please, let me explain. It was a mistake. He told me he was separating." The lies tumbled out, desperate and unconvincing. "A mistake for a year, Kendra," I interjected, my voice cutting through her desperate pleas. "And you were telling Leo about your boyfriend, about Mark, while you were planning your next tryst. You both betrayed your partners. You were both in on it." Mark didn't need to hear more. He slowly, deliberately removed Kendra's arm from his. His face was a mask of cold devastation. "I think we're done here, Kendra," he said, his voice flat, final. "I can't even look at you right now." He turned and walked away, not running, but with a stiff, determined stride that spoke of utter brokenness. Kendra stood there, abandoned, exposed, her face a mixture of shame and fury. She glared at me, her eyes spitting venom. You'll pay for this," she hissed, her voice barely audible over the gala's din. I simply met her gaze, a ghost of a smile touching my lips. "Oh, Kendra," I said softly, the satisfaction a bitter taste on my tongue. "I think you already have." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the crowded ballroom, her carefully constructed world shattered around her. The rest of the night was a blur. I made my polite farewells, my mission accomplished. I felt no joy, no wild elation, just a deep, pervasive sense of quiet resolution. It wasn't the explosive, cathartic revenge I might have imagined in my darker moments. It was a cold, precise execution of justice. When I returned to the house, it was dark and silent. Leo was still gone, probably hiding, licking his wounds. I didn't care. The final act of this painful drama had been played. I spent the next few days meticulously organizing all our financial documents. The gala had been Kendra's reckoning. Now it was Leo's turn. I met with a lawyer armed with every piece of evidence, every detail of his betrayal, and every financial record I could find. My divorce would be swift, decisive, and financially punitive. He would feel the consequences not just emotionally, but in every aspect of his comfortable life. Life in Louisville would go on, but for Brandon Clark, it was a new chapter. The rhythm was different now, not comfortable, but resolute. My heart was healing, slowly, brick by painstaking brick. I was no longer the naive husband, blind to the deceit around him. I was a man who had faced betrayal head-on and emerged, not unscathed, but stronger, wiser, and with a clear understanding of justice on his own terms. The storm had come, and I had been the one to unleash it. And as I looked out at the familiar Louisville skyline, I knew I was ready to build my own future, one honest brick at a time, free from the shadows of his lies. It was a painful, brutal ending to a love story, but it was a beginning of a new, fiercely independent one for me. There would be no unexpected twists, no lingering doubts. Just a quiet, profound sense of having made things right as best as they could be, and the promise of a future built on truth. This was my closure, my hard-won peace. This was my revenge.